Welcome to Ask AI, the podcast that brings you insightful interviews and news from the world of Canadian artificial intelligence. This episode is sponsored by Microsoft Canada. Microsoft is committed to building trusted and responsible AI systems. To learn more, go to microsoft.com/AI and check out their free AI business school to start building intelligence into your solutions today. We're also sponsored by Cinchi, the global leader in data fabric technology. Visit Cinchi.com to learn how to eliminate integration and turbocharge your AI transformation.
Hello, and welcome to this week's very special episode of the Ask AI podcast, where we are so fortunate to have Stephany Lapierre, the founder and CEO of Tealbook. Prior to Tealbook, Stephany spent 10 years building a successful strategic sourcing consulting firm. And that led to the creation of Tealbook, ultimately. She is a speaker and significant leader in the Toronto tech scene. And we're extremely, extremely fortunate to have her here. Welcome, Stephany.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
I am so excited. I know we haven't seen each other in a little while, given COVID, but I'm so excited that you're taking the time because, a lot of founders in Canada, they do well, but like what you're saying, there's very few like at the Shopify scale, you're trending up that way. And it's very exciting to talk to someone who's really just done so well. On your website, you say you've got 73 million in funding total, 107 employees. And I mean, in 2021, you didn't raise one round, you raised two. You've got your Series A at the top of the year and Series B of 50 million at the end of the year. Congratulations. How does it all feel?
It's always people say like congratulations on all your success. And meanwhile, I'm always thinking like what's gonna break tomorrow. And you raise a lot of money, but you spend a lot more money. And I remember meeting a founder years ago who had raised 38 million at the time US. And I thought like, oh, my life must be so good with having so much capital. And it's just different. Like it's not actually the amount of money that we burn and how we're investing and to get to the next milestone. And there's different complexities, right? The early days you're hustling and it's hard. And then now it's hard different. We're building the machine and that means enabling a lot of new people and having to address things that, in the early days, you're kind of only, at the time, you're only dreaming of, because if you had, some of those challenges, that means that you're kind of in a completely different stage. Anyway, different scale, different challenges. Definitely don't feel like I've yet, there's a lot of successes to be celebrated, but there's still a long way to go.
Absolutely. Well, I am a big fan of celebrating your successes along the way. So please keep doing that. And I appreciate that humbleness of saying, hey, we're still on this road. There's a ways to go. And so let's dive into starting with talking about you. You mentioned the early days, it's hard, and now it's hard, but it's different. And as mentioned before we started, I did do some research and I don't want to make you repeat yourself, but it's fascinating to me how you spent 9 years consulting and that really led you to Tealbook. And in one of the interviews you've already given, you said, you're almost fighting it. And you could see this opportunity and you're like, but no one's doing it. Like, no one's doing it. Does that mean that it could be wrong? And then eventually you said, no one's doing it. It is right. And why not me? And maybe you could talk to us in a little bit more detail about that transition of the moment when you said, okay, why not me? And I'm going to do this and making that choice because it's a big choice.
Yeah, so I had to your point, I had the idea for a long time. And the market was not quite ready. I needed cloud technology to be more mainstream in my space in order for Tealbook to even exist. And so that was, 15 years ago, a lot of the software was still on premise. And to tackle this problem the way we have, you needed technology that was not software based. You needed technology that was machine learning based. And so that was also, although I was seeing it in different medium or platform that I was using personally, I hadn't yet seen it on the enterprise side. What the catalyst was, I was working with a large biotech company in San Francisco, and my consulting firm were helping them identify suppliers that could bring innovation to address some business challenges that they had. And the whole process was just so manual and difficult because the information about suppliers who had already done business, who had already signed MSA with that client was not easily available. Like you couldn't find just the information, like who have you done business with? Like even when we would find a supplier that was innovative, the supplier would tell us if they had an MSA with the customer because the information was just not easily shared or easily accessible. And so we would go through the 16-week process to then at the end find out that, one of the supplier was actually precluded from working with the company. And so we had wasted all this time, all this effort. And at the time I was thinking, this is a company in San Francisco. I can see SAP across the street, Facebook, LinkedIn, Salesforce, and they're having this challenge and it's really creating a lot of friction and duplication and cost and loss of opportunities. And so I came back from that meeting thinking like this is the time. I think, now that cloud technology and the cloud-based software providers were also advocating that cloud technology was going to fix data because I saw this as a data problem, not a software problem. And we've just seen Salesforce, right, building the unified customer information, which required still a lot of human intervention in order for the data in Salesforce to be good. And then you had companies like Zoom Info aggregating in different ways to come to a better record of the supplier so that they could feed that better information, like contact information, into Salesforce and then delivering better sales and marketing outcome. And so I saw this very similar, although the analogy kind of came later from Zoom Info, it was a very similar moment where I was like, these software, it's not because it's cloud-based source to pay your software provider that's going to mean better data for the organization because they compete in itself. And so they're creating disparity in the fact that they're competing for this marketplace. So anyway, so that's really, I took the leap of faith. My husband, I remember him saying like, are you sure you want to do this? And I was like, yeah, because I had no idea what that would take. I had no idea how hard it was going to be. And so naivety is a bliss. I thought that, I was going to build this company and Sean Parker was going to show up behind me and introduce us to amazing investors. And, we were going to be $1 billion company within a few years. And it was really hard. Like the journey was really hard and I have no regret. But if I knew what I know now, I probably would have not done it just because it was 7 years in front of me that was going to be incredibly challenging and it requires, you know, efforts and resilience that is not really human. And so again, I love what I do. I smile 98% of the time. I'm super passionate about building this business. Um, but at the time was definitely like I had no idea what it was going to take.
I feel you on that. As a founder myself, yep, I agree. If I had known what I know, I definitely wouldn't have done it. It is a lot. And, that's not to discourage our listeners, but just to say maybe don't research too much. Just jump in and get started and don't overthink it because if you overthink it, you might not do it. And obviously, it has been a worthwhile endeavor for you and certainly hear you on that superhuman resilience. My goodness.
Yeah, and I think the one important thing is to have really strong conviction for the problem you're solving. Like that's what never changed for me. People even see me 7 years later when I started the MVP. It's been 5 years since we've been funded by institutional investors. They're like, you're still so passionate. Like it's the same amount of passion because I have such strong conviction for the problem we're solving. What's rewarding today is that there are more companies fundraising and getting capital and there's more companies talking our language that are positioning themselves as a supplier data foundation. They're tackling it a certain way that's very similar to ours. Um, and it's the first time we really have competition because no one spoke this way, a couple of years ago. To me, that validates that the industry is going our direction and the fact that those software providers that sold the market that they could fix data have come to us and we're now partnered with the 5 of the 6 major source to pay providers in our space. And so all of that and that we have major brands, using our platform and are bought into the vision. Those are all, amazing validation point that we have and still, as I said earlier, still a long way to go.
Wow. Well, that's incredible that you've never wavered on the conviction. And I think that is the sign of, in my opinion, a true founder. And I'm pretty opinionated on this. But yeah, when you believe to the ends of the earth, like this is the thing that just needs to be in the world, that is what will drive you. That is what will get you through, what you talked about, those 7 hard years up front. And I do want to come back to what you mentioned here on the more similar companies, finally seeing competition speaking the same language. So I want to come back to that. But first, going to what you were saying about that tipping point of how you got started and how a few things had to line up. You had to have cloud as an option. You needed to move away from on-prem. It was not, I love what you said, it was not a software solution per se. It was a machine learning based solution, machine learning based technology. And really, that field started breaking incredible ground in 2018. Let's be realistic. That's when we started seeing transformer models and all those things. Like, really, the field has just exploded since then. And, you also mentioned that it's a data problem, not a software problem. It's a data problem fundamentally, hence the machine learning angle. And that means Tealbook is fundamentally rooted as a machine learning company. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, I mean the in our space, and if you sell to the enterprise, you'll relate easily, is that when an enterprise has a software system to workflow information or collect record from suppliers, they have multiple portals. And so in an environment that's quite natural for our clients that will have ERP, sometimes multiple through acquisition, they'll have source to pay. They may have a different e-invoicing platform that's going to require to go and put your banking information. They'll have a sourcing solution that may require a supplier to come in and put information in. They'll have an onboarding solution, right, that may be attached or not to their main software. They will have compliance management solution, third party risk management solution, supplier relationship management solution. I mean, the amount of optionality, and 99% of those solutions require suppliers to come to a portal to put their information. It's the same information over and over again. When you implement one of those system, it requires good data. And often it's pulled out of a financial system, it's cleansed, it's uploaded, and then someone has to maintain it. And so it's either the company itself, which requires a lot of time and resources, and they're typically then asking suppliers to come, and suppliers don't come, so they never end up having really good data. And then they're not also reaping the benefit of the solution because the solution was sold with the assumption that the data was going to be good. So they're pointing fingers that the software is not working. And blah. So it's created this like really, I think the toughest challenge was to unlearn, right? What people have learned is like if you're using software to collect information, it's going to fail, especially if you're relying on suppliers to come to that solution because it just can't do it at a speed and scale. So our approach have been different where we use machine to go and find information on every B2B company in the world. And we've autonomously created profiles of those companies. And so since the inception of Tealbook, we start using research project as a way to say, hey, what qualifies as a B2B company versus a hair salon? What about that company is interesting to a buyer? What do they do is super important. What's their capabilities? How they're being categorized? Where are they physically located? Do they have affiliates or parent and child hierarchy? Who their customers are in what sectors? Who are the people in the organization? And then we start focusing on, attributes that allowed us to develop similar supplier search. And so if we can find suppliers that are most similar to one another, it can highlight in your master data that you have a lot of similar suppliers and probably too much duplicate. So you could reduce the number of suppliers or areas that you don't have enough similar suppliers and you may want to introduce, especially if there's a lot of similar suppliers in the world, that would introduce competition and drive savings. It's also been very powerful when COVID hit that we have a search engine. And so by looking again at those trends, we're able to help countless number of companies identify PPEs, PPE manufacturers, ingredients to make different equipments. And so we had done this sort of outreach to the market, say, hey, we can help provide, suppliers for any organization in the world that is looking for contingent suppliers for whatever reason. And we got indebted from a lot of requests from public, private sector, and software providers that were looking for solutions. So our approach to be more of like a machine learning first creation allows us to, again, provide more information to our customers by matching their master data to our data set. And then we're able to turn the light on by giving more information on the suppliers they do business with. And that's all without the suppliers having to come to a profile to put their information. So it sort of saves a lot of time. And then, not so much on the ML side, but we can then feed that data through API or in our UI. And then we have other ways that we're leveraging ML either by learning if we get two-way feedback on data so that we're able to continuously enrich our data set. And then our UI learning from the users based on what they're searching, their behaviors, what they may be. And they can also contribute to the data. So we're able to grab as well some of that gold data that contributes to, again, enriching that profile. So our objective is to develop the best supplier data, transform the B2B supplier data market to give the enterprise, greater visibility and then achieve their corporate objective that it's, more sustainable, more agile, more diverse. Um, you know, and when we're talking diverse is minority owned to small businesses to local businesses, ultimately building more flexible and competitive supplier base.
Yeah. I mean, wow, wow, wow is really all you can say to that. Having been on both sides of recruitment, you're right. There's 6 million places that everything needs to go. It's the same stuff and it over and over and over again. So it really is incredible what you've been able to do. And I mean, the market is telling you, it looks like you were right about this solution. And I love one of the stats in a different article that talked about your company that I saw in some of the pre-research that said, you've seen results with customers with supplier diversity increasing from 20% to 150% overnight. What an incredible statistic. Like, and I love that you mentioned, small, local, like all these other elements and how diversity is one piece alongside sustainability and transformation. And I love the way that you talk about the savings if you have duplicates and hey, maybe getting more similar vendors as well to drive additional savings, right? Because you can use competition. I mean, it's fascinating. I'm very fascinated by procurement. Maybe not everyone in the world is, but I am, and I think it's incredible.
Well, I think people are more fascinated now than they were maybe, 2, 3 years ago. It was sort of the unsexy business, but with all the amount of disruption in the supply chain, having visibility into the supplier base is so critical.
And maybe this is a good time to talk about that. What you touched on earlier is that you're seeing more similar companies. People are speaking your language. Do you believe that you were one of those companies that did category creation? Like, is this it? Tealbook did category creation because it sure looks like it.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, again, there's a conference recently and a new player um basically copied our positioning and our messaging. And initially the reaction it was like, oh, but then you're like, it's kind of flattering. And having more companies talking about this message that you need data as a foundation to your digital transformation. You need data as a foundation to implementing all these different software that will enable your digital transformation. And you still need processes and workflows. But if you don't have a strong data foundation, you're probably not going to reap the benefit of the investment that you've made in technology and fault to the software. And so in a way, yeah, I think it's flattering. I think it's going to help expand awareness and it will just have to keep pushing to make sure that we are continuing to innovate. We have an edge. We have, more years in front of us, more learnings. We've got capital right now. We've got fantastic customers who are now we're building a new layer in our platform and we've got, four of the largest brands in the world that are partnered with us to make sure that we nail this new layer, giving our customers more control, more governance over their data. So yeah, I definitely think, yeah, we definitely built something that people didn't understand. And now that the market is catching up, it's incredibly rewarding to see that it is becoming a thing.
Yeah. And what a great position to be in. And I love, again, that hunger that you talk about, which you did mention very early in the interview, too. It's like, we're not done. We're just getting going here. We've got our learnings, we've got this behind us, but there's still such a big road in front of us. And I really appreciate that. And for our listeners who maybe don't know what category creation is, the book Play Bigger is all about category creation. And often actually those are not always the startups that get VC funded. And maybe that speaks to some of the struggle you had in the early 7 years. And certainly something I've seen in my experience too is that sometimes category creation is the hardest thing to do. They always say, like investors will say to you, hey, what is the line item on the budget that someone already pays for something that's slower, worse, and not as good? Like, where are you going to save the money, speed them up, and make them happier? And they already have a budget line item for that. But for you, really coming in and creating that budget line item, creating a category, creating a whole language and vision and seeing those flattery, forcing copycats, so to speak, that is difficult to do. So I will commend you for sure.
Well, what I would say, someone's building a category, because the way we win customers isn't in a place where they have been a budget. They have been solutions that were software based. And so I take supply diversity, for example. It's a great wedge use case for us because the market is educated. It is a commitment that they've made to shareholders or their consumers. And the solutions today, being portal based, has relied on those small, diverse businesses to come in and put a certificate in a portal. And the process of matching the master data, cleaning it up, validation, reporting is really manual. And our clients felt like they were still under reporting because they didn't have full visibility if suppliers didn't go to the portal. And so with machine learning, we were able to actually expose and find all the certificates autonomously and match them to suppliers so that when we got the master data, that's when we can highlight, a 20 to 300% in additional spend, not because they're spending more money. It's that they were sitting on these suppliers all along, these suppliers that are certified that meet the requirements, but they were just not capturing them. Now, the other benefit, yeah, and so that's really powerful. The other benefit is to find companies that meet the requirements but are not certified. And so, showing our customers like here's a potential pipeline of suppliers that meet those requirements, but if they're not certified, they can't report on them. And so we've built in our UI and our software part of our solution a way for our customers to outreach to those suppliers and get themselves certified for free. And so the impact we can have for our clients, but my point is not so much talking about Tealbook as what is a use case that's tangible that customers are looking for solution today? Because if you have this blue sky data platform, it's almost too much for customers to understand. But if they can see that a data-led approach to solving something like supply diversity, versus a software-based approach, they can buy into the outcome, and then that creates energy, and then they can continue advocating for your product and find additional use cases that they would want to leverage your data. So again, I think it's really important to find something that's tangible in the market. Otherwise, it's just very difficult to sell something that's so blue sky.
Wow. 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 I mean, I feel like Oprah, the way she says wow on her Super Soul Sundays, but like really. And again, I love how you said, well, we did have to find that wedge use case and we did have to make it something that people could understand, especially being so new. And, we're getting towards the end here. And I do want to ask you a couple of questions about the field of AI, what you're seeing, where things are going, and then touching on a few things, lessons learned, nuggets, takeaways for our listeners, because a lot of our listeners are very obviously AI focused and hopefully future company creators and CEOs themselves. But on the AI piece, what out there is really exciting you? What is one or two trends or maybe a company that you're seeing in the field of AI that you are super excited about and just think that's fascinating?
I don't know if there's a specific company. I think one of the things that our first CTO who brought the concept of using machines to create our profile told me when he left, and it was the right time, right? He was there for 4 years. He built the initial technology, and then as we grew up, we moved on, and we now have a new CTO. But what he said is that you're going to meet people that are going to be either paralyzed by the challenge of using AI to create data, or they're going to be energized by it. And the easy way to create um, usually, to get data would be to build workflow or aggregate other people's data and then put AI on top of that, versus us using, different ways of going after that data and then putting it into a format that our clients can consume. And that was really tricky, actually finding a CTO that understood both the engineering side of building a data platform and the architecture, and also being energized by using AI. And so, the one things I'm excited, one, how fast the technology is going, the models that we can now leverage that we don't have to create ourselves, the technologies that are enabling ML to get to production much faster, right? And those are pretty exciting. And I think as a consumer of AI, just being mindful that if someone's talking about ML and a software, it needs critical mass or it needs a lot of data. And if you don't have neither of those things, you're probably just buying something that's going to take a very long time to reap the benefit. So just to be more educated, mindful on, what is the AI? Because there's a lot of still buzzword kicking around that are not really delivering. the type of promise to customers.
Yeah. Well, what a great way to think about it in understanding, you're going to be paralyzed by what AI can do or energized by it. Like the paralyzing fear of how steep that data hurdle initially is very true. I want to pull from a few articles. You talked about some, 5 things you wish you knew before becoming a CEO, which I think ties in really nicely to what we were talking about earlier in the sense of if we knew what we know now, we may not have done this. I'll read the 5 summarization of them. Hiring smart people as hungry as you are to win, following your instincts, making decisions faster, don't talk to investors too soon, and really the power of telling the stories about your customer success and getting customers to advocate for you. Those are 5 things that you wish you knew before becoming a CEO. And I want to ask, is there anything you'd add to that or anything you'd tweak?
It's funny to hear my quotes. No, I think they're pretty accurate. I do think building that team early on, and I do think one of my views, because there's a lot of talk about female founders. I mentor a lot of female founders, and there's this, and I know the stats are real, right? Raising capital as a female founder is like what 3%, I think, of venture-backed companies are female founded. So it's real, but when I think of it is from an investor perspective, it's more risk profiling. And I do think women in general, and I'm super generalizing here, but a lot of women founders are single founders often, um, and take on a lot of responsibilities and risk for quite a long time versus building the team. If you have 4 women coming to me with complementary skills, with a great vision, with a big market, I'm sure if you look at the stats, it would probably be much closer to other companies versus, having the single female founder because it's a risk profiling, right? So, um, I do think, building that team early on with people that complement you, no matter the gender, you're going to increase your chance of being able to execute faster, give more confidence to investors to invest, and you're just going to be stronger for it. And so that was my one regret is I did this on my own. Um, I had people that I found through the journey, and now we've got an incredible team. But that journey, if it's a lot, it's lonely always as a founder and CEO. But those early days are just, I don't want to go back there.
Exactly. We're not going back. We're moving forward. But thank you for your lessons learned and sharing that with us. I also solo founded, and you're right. It is really wild. I think I hear in what you're saying the empathy for the investor's position on, hey, look, it's risk profiling. Their whole thing is to try to get one really big hit out of 10 investments. They know 9 aren't going to make it. They just need one. And so it's a losing game to begin with, but that risk profiling, they got to do everything they can. So I hear the empathy you have for investors. And again, for our listeners, one of the books I've recommended to, at this point, probably a couple hundred founders who really enjoyed is Secrets of Sand Hill Road, written by one of the partners at Andreessen Horowitz, which is a very good, good is an understatement, but one of the best firms in the world, fundamentally. And Secrets of Sand Hill Road really does help build that empathy for investors. So I hear that when you talk, that empathy for investors in their position. And I also hear, you saying, but, you needed to do what you needed to do. And you wanted to start this. And I hear perhaps a little chicken and egg on some level. Like you just needed to get going. And what you say, bringing in the right people along the way and building the team as you scaled, as you had more funding, as you had more customers. That's how it goes. So, I think that's some really great nuggets. And with that, congratulations again. You have an endless list of awards. I almost read it in your bio, and then I was just like, there are so many. So congratulations on the success. And do you have any parting words for our listeners, again, who are probably very heavily focused in AI, possibly even some students? Any final words of wisdom?
I think from an AI perspective, because we do have a lot of, data scientists here, I think just knowing first, like find a problem that you want to solve that's real and tangible is all, unless you want to stay on the academic side, obviously, but if you want to relate to the business, find a problem and a solution that you really get that conviction and understand it. Because as you're developing models and as you're working to know what the value to the customer is, ask questions, like really get deeper, listen to customer calls, understand the problem that they're facing and how technology and data can solve some of those challenges. I think you're going to be so much better for it, and that that sort of combining the business with the scientist part, right, is what makes, I think, in my view, the best data scientists or machine learning, experts.
Are you hiring any machine learning or data scientists?
Yes, we are hiring. Yeah,
Yes.
we've hired a lot. So our team now, we've quadrupled the size of our data and R&D team since, I think since January. It's crazy.
Whoa.
And we still have some roles. So if you are looking, please, reach out. We're still hiring, and we're solving for, helping bring a lot of more equity, and we're helping beyond supply diversity. We're now tackling sustainability. So helping large organization promote and support businesses that are, adopting and changing their practices to be more sustainable. There's a lot of good that we can do in the world on this mission, and I think that's really important, again, for all of our Tealbookers to know that they're making a difference in the world.
Yeah. Well, I'll close with two final things. One, you have to go hear Stephany's interview from October 2021 with Refinery VC Fast Frontiers. I did not repeat a lot of what was there because there's incredible origin stories. There's so many great nuggets. This was more focused on artificial intelligence specifically, and more focused about, we were able to talk about category creation and a lot of other neat things. One thing I just have to repeat the origin story of Tealbook just briefly from that interview, and I can highly recommend that you all go and listen to it. But Stephany tells this incredible story of being with a client at J&J, and someone who was there was saying, hey, I want to introduce you to this company that's so cool, and literally pulled out a physical binder and then spent 10 minutes digging through to find the card. And you tell this story, and these are your words that I'm saying. And that to me is indicative of so much of, what was very wrong that you have come in to solve with Tealbook. So please go check that out and hear Stephany say it, not me, the origin story and some other nuggets along the way in her journey. And we just, again, want to thank you so much for being here, being an incredible example, being real, and talking about, the struggles what it took to get here. And again, really emphasizing it's data. It's all about the data. You need good data. And I'm sure our listeners are well aware of that. So thank you again.
Yeah, thanks, Melissa, for having me.
And thanks as always to our generous sponsors, Microsoft Canada and Cinchi, the DataWare platform. Don't forget to check out our team check-ins, which is another great way to get involved with the Ask AI podcast. You can get more details at askai.org, askai.org. We invite our listeners to also send us questions and feedback to info@askai.org. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Ask AI podcast. The sponsors of this episode were Microsoft Canada, producers of the free AI Business School, and Cinchi, the dataware platform that makes integration obsolete. The series producer was Chris McClellan. The series editor was James Fajardo. Original music was provided by Mike Letourneau. To learn how to be featured on our podcast and get information about sponsorship and volunteering opportunities, please visit our website at askai.org, send us an email to info@askai.org, or talk to our bot by visiting askai.org/chatbot.